Hello and welcome to week 3 in the psychology of personality. And we are going to be looking at chapter 3 and chapter 4. So we're doing 2 chapters. This is going to be a little bit of loading into the class. So it's really going to be important for you to get involved in these discussions early. So chapter 3, we take on the man, Sigmund Freud. And I introduced at this point basically conceptually what is a theory, and because we're kind of exploring some of the major historical theories that still hold some water today related to personality. And a theory it's often reflective of what we might call a model, and that is an individual, either through research or observation or just simply thinking, comes up with a number of factors that they believe are associated with producing a phenomenon. They then draw the connections and interactions between those different parts and then conclude with an explanation of what they're observing using that model. And that model will be referred to as a theory. So we're introduced to the theory, psychodynamic theory, produced by Sigmund Freud and many others. And that, people that followed some people the previous, had some, he didn't come up with all of those ideas, and certainly those people that came after. And the psychodynamic theory really focuses on a psychic energy of some kind that Freud refers to that exists within the mind, not within the biological structure of the brain, but within the mind, that he referred to as the id, the ego, and the superego. The id represents our primary impulses and selfish needs. The superego is learned over time, and it's the limits of our behavior placed upon us by society. The ego is the I. It's actually, in the original translation, it's the same word, German word for I. The ego is not the German word for I, but the meaning is I. And I'm sitting here with needs to protect myself, to seek pleasure, to not die, to make sure that my genes go on to the next generation, those kind of things. And I have to balance the forces, the energy exchange between my id and my superego. We often see this portrayed as the little angel and the little devil, the devil being the id and the little angel being the superego, and you have the individual that's in a confounding situation. From that, Freud developed a very comprehensive model and theory of personality that he used to explain normal personality and abnormal personality. He is, as much as the theory has fallen out of favor, there are neo-Freudian individuals who continue to feel that this is a useful theory. There are still individuals like you and I that gain a lot by perceiving certain things with his theory. I mean, that when we're in a difficult decision and there's an angel and the devil, or there's the pros and cons, we think that way all the time. And that's something that we got from there. When we think about defense mechanisms, which are the ways in which the ego comes up with strategies to equalize the energies between both sides. So if each one of the defense mechanisms has that goal of lowering anxiety in the individual, the anxiety that when we feel when we're in the situation of a strong id impulse and a strong superego impulse happening at the same time. So they're very useful, very creative, very elegant, very story-like. Lots of references to ancient Greek stories and whatnot, with Oedipus and with various other stories throughout the ancient world that he used as examples of his psychic experiences that people have. So one of the things that he introduced, probably one of the more powerful effects these have on modern psychology, is in essence, and this is very much taking the essence of what he did, he basically said early childhood experiences are important because they affect us later on. Thank you, Freud, for that. We know that that's true. It's very interesting to consider that it wasn't necessarily a popular idea prior to the fact that he popularized it. And he called it, get my notes here, psychic determinism. So basically, way back in our early life, things get laid out. Our experiences create a personality. And in his personality development model, he says that that's all done by the time we're done adolescence. We're pretty much, our personality is fixed. Now, even his contemporaries fought him against that. Erik Erikson, who was a dear friend of his, said, no, I think there's still stuff that happens into adulthood. And that was one of the ways in which they actually split in terms of their professional relationship. So, so he felt the personality was done there. And to give him a little bit of a nod, we know that early childhood experience can have a profound and difficult to change impact on later experiences and later personality. So, in the discussion, Chapter 3, Discussion A, I want to hear what you think about psychic determinism. In the next discussion, we look at a kind of an interesting side note to his methodologies. He felt the structure of the personality, that most of the personality was below our awareness. But sometimes, under duress, or in our dreams, or through free association, or these methodologies that he had when he was actually meeting with patients, they would slip out. So let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm really angry with my boss, and I'm talking to my wife about my boss. My boss is a man, let's say. It's not, but if my boss was a man, and I would say, oh, you wouldn't believe what Dad said. I mean, you wouldn't believe what Bob said to me. Everyday conversation, we might think that that's just a casual, I put the word Dad in there. Not Freud. Freud would say, tell me a little that's where you get that phrase, tell me about your mother. Tell me a little bit about your father. Why did that come up? Why did that slip up? He felt that that was something from the unconscious that came out and was worthy of exploration. Might be nothing. I was just thinking about my dad at that time. I have a very positive relationship with my dad, but he would say, the anger from your boss, or maybe the anger to your boss, is actually displaced anger that you had toward Dad, but Dad's gone now, so you got to take it out on your boss. Had all kinds of interpretations like that. Now, I would challenge you, for example, to consider how much this is embedded in our culture today. This idea that slips can be indicators of something else going on. You simply have to think about, if you're with your partner and you're in an intimate moment, and during the peak of that intimate moment, they say somebody else's name, would you simply brush it off as being, oh, they just made a mistake? Or would you think there's something going on? And chances are you would probably not be very happy with that. And you would suspect, are you thinking about that person? Where's that person? Particularly if it's an ex, right? You know what I'm talking about. So we all sort of, in a way, kind of understand this concept, even though that whole thing, by and large, has been discredited in the field. But yet, we would all be very reluctant to let go of an incident like that. Okay, so in discussion B, you don't have to use those kind of examples, but I'm asking you, have you ever slipped? And then, oh, maybe there's something behind that. Or maybe you slipped and there wasn't something behind that. So, talk about that. The chapter 3 quiz, talks about anxiety. And I'm going to read my notes here. Anxiety is when the ego is overwhelmed by. by competing needs between the id and the superego. talk about a point of anxiety, and I want you to put the Freud's little round lenses on. I want you to put those on, and I want you to look at it, look at this anxiety situation, and how would you consider personal selfish needs and the limits of society as being factors that they were in conflict, and because of that conflict, your anxiety went up. Our role in as an ego is just keep things calm. But because those id and ego impulses were in conflict with each other, we experienced anxiety. So explain the anxiety incident that you had in those terms. So applying the theory. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to think that this is the real thing that's going on. Simply have to exercise the skill of examining that experience using this theory. At that point, we switch. We go to Alfred Adler, my personal favorite of all the Freudian type guys. I really like Adler, and Harry Stack Sullivan. And they put these two together because they approached personality and in very, very similar ways, except for the goal of our activities. So just very, when you read these two theories, that they're closely matched, and their own personalities, their own histories play such a huge role in the development of their theories. The theorists' own lives appear in their theories. You can understand the theorists a lot by looking at the theory. And keep in mind that this is a time in psychology where ideas were, Freud, for example, was incredibly defensive of his ideas. He did not give quarter to people. Well, maybe you're wrong. He wasn't wrong. He did not feel he was wrong. Many people agreed with him. They thought, and truthfully, every one of these people are of genius capacities, created very elegant and intricate models, and were very, very passionate about their particular perspectives. Necessary, really, that those kinds of extremes of thought. We're going to see this when we talk about Skinner. We're going to see this in other theories that, this is the way it is. Everything else is BS. That kind of perspective that people have, theorists have. And it gives us these sort of heroes that we can look at and say, wow, they really did a lot of work on this. They really were passionate about it. Gave us very rich material. So nowadays, we can actually, we're sort of in what I call the Batman utility belt era, where we can look at all these different theories and we can use them all. We're not necessarily married to any one of them, but there might be times when id and ego are really important in helping someone through a situation, and there might be instances where Adler's view on inferiority might be the key to understanding what somebody's going through. Very, very, very cool position to be in today when all of these people have done all of this work. So chapter 4, we're looking at Adler and Harry Stack Sullivan. Adler produced individual psychology. His focus was on inferiority versus superiority, compensation for that, and we developed a life plan and a lifestyle that its major motivational factors were having to do with our relative degree of inferiority or superiority with people around us. Not necessarily the kind of like, I'm going to be just better than everybody else. Does that? It's just making sure that we're in line. Maybe we're keeping up with the Joneses, maybe, if you want to look at that from an economic point of view. But we want to make sure that we're not too behind, and that we're getting kudos for being good. And I put in the course book a friend of mine, Enoch Glidden, with his permission. Got his permission to tell this story. His story, he was born with spina bifida, and his drive to do the sports that he's involved in and to live the life as an example that he has is he was born with something that would pretty much put somebody at an inferior level. His legs were largely non-functional. He moves around on his hands, uses a wheelchair, and from that point of physical inferiority, he leads a life of battling against that being a major factor in his life. It is, of course, the most major factor in his life, but he lives his life in a way that really aligns with Adler's thoughts of I'm not gonna let this keep me down. And an inspiration to everybody who knows him uh, to, um, to see how he's led his life through that process. Now, Sullivan comes in and he says that we are engaging with other people, but the goal isn't necessary to make those divisions of inferior and superior in terms of our relation to others, but that the relationships are ends in themselves. We pursue social interactions simply to create those connections with other people. When we are connected to people, we experience what he termed euphoria. When we're not as connected to people, we feel tension. If you think about relationships per se, and there's when things are running smooth, life is good. You know, crap can be happening outside, but you come home to your partner and things, you're right in line doing it, everything's cool. It is a really, really pleasurable sense. Um, if things are not good in a interpersonal relationship, boy, do you feel it. Whether when somebody's angry at you or when you've been arguing lately, it's really a downer, and it occupies a lot of our brain space, a lot of our interest in taking action and being worried about things and whatever. And sometimes even our most dysfunctional habits come out during this thing. And that's kind of the focus that Sullivan took, which he was like, that's what's driving people in terms of the shaping of their personalities and whatnot. So one last piece, the discussion, okay, having to do with Adler. Uh, superiority versus inferiority, driving forces of motivation and social interaction. To what degree can you identify where this theory sort of makes sense to you? That the driving component of this. Remember, we're the Batman utility belt. We can take these theories out anytime. So maybe there was you're an artist or a musician or an athlete, and where superiority and inferiority is emphasized, kind of thing. And what drove you was really this idea that I wanted to be part of that group that was good at this. I didn't want to be inferior. I wanted to be part of that. Um, in the quiz, I'm switching you to Sullivan, which is to reflect on your style of life, reflecting on how you were raised, what your life is going to be like, and a little bit on Adler versus Sullivan in terms of comparing and contrasting the idea of superior inferiority or attaining interpersonal security. So now you can tell how these intertwine because just getting away from the specifics of what I'm asking you to do, I ask you to Uh, I think of a person who's an athlete and wants to align with those who are good at basketball. So they start practicing basketball. So there's this inferiority, superiority thing that's going on. But then at the same time, there's also this motivation that I want to have a group of friends, and that gives me security. Makes me feel good about being in the world because I had friends, and those people are people at school that I know, and they're my buds, and and stuff like that. So see how these theories interact. It's between these two. Again, the reason why they get thrown together in textbooks like this is because they're kind of both working at the same time. Both this idea of I'm different than the people that I'm around, and then this need for other people in my life in order to feel secure. So all right. So that's the expectations for this week. Have a great week. Take care, and I will see you online.